Hi, my name is Dr. Todd, and in today's video, I want to talk about a really important issue that we might not think about when it comes to parenting. And that's our own behaviors and how they might be sabotaging the relationship with our kids without us even realizing it. Let's talk about two behaviors some of us do as parents that could be hurting our kids. Behavior number one, that's us worrying too much about what other people think of us. That's us seeking external validation. Let me illustrate this with a true story. Not long ago, I worked with a young man, and we're going to call him Jordan. Jordan was an awesome kid, but he had been struggling with depression, suicidal thoughts, and drug use. And it really wasn't clear to me when I first met him if he was depressed because of his drug use or if he was self-medicating with drugs because he was depressed. It probably was a little bit of both at this point. But he was such a cool kid and clearly was lost and heading down a path to nowhere. Well, part of Jordan's problem was that his mom, we'll call her Kelly, she was so concerned with being cool and liked by Jordan and by all of his friends. She needed that validation from them, and she needed it from everybody, but she wanted to be the cool mom, and you could tell that by all of her behaviors. It was really important to her to be approved of by others. Well, Kelly was beautiful in her mid-40s. She dressed like she was in her teens, but what stood out most to me was just how needy she was to be liked by Jordan. Because she was so concerned with his acceptance, Kelly's only concern was him having fun. She had no structure, no rules, no expectations. The only expectation really was that she wanted him to do whatever he wanted to do. And she also had this tendency to insert herself into all of his friendships. She actually flirted with his friends, and she would allow the kids to come over to their beach home, party with alcohol, marijuana. That was very common. In a way, Kelly was also, in essence, Jordan's drug dealer. Maybe drug broker is a better term, but she could not tolerate him ever being anxious. So if he was having a bad day or if he became upset about something, she would go get him whatever he needed. If he ran out of marijuana, she knew right where to get a resupply. I know this is kind of an extreme example, but it's a very real example of the struggle that some of us might have with external validation or external approval. That might even be the approval that you seek from your kid or from those that know you. Our whole society is geared around what other people think of us. And I think this has only gotten worse with the dominance of social media in our lives. It's likely that if we look closely, some of our parenting is affected by what others will think of us because of our kids. As fun as it is to be the proud parent, we need to carefully examine what our motives are as we discipline or don't discipline our kids. Our decisions and what we require of our kids need to be based altruistically on what's in their best interests. If it isn't, they're going to know it, and it'll backfire, and it'll be destructive to your relationship with them. I know a lot of kids who actually make bad choices just because it'll hurt their parents because of how much their parents worry about what their neighbors will think of them. So it's just a form of rebellion. We need to learn to let go of what others think in healthy ways, and we need to teach our kids to do the same. Behavior number two that could be hurting our kids, I think that is that sometimes we can get too controlling. There's actually a parenting style called authoritarian parenting. It's the old school method. Just think of drill sergeants. It's the my way or the highway, and compliance is always sort of the focus, right? Well, we're pretty clear on what the research tells us about this style of parenting. You usually do get compliant kids in the short term, but eventually they rebel. I've seen this over and over and over. We also know that these kids turn out to be followers because they're always looking for somebody else to tell them what to do. We know from research these are kids who struggle with low self-esteem. If you parent this way, it's great at creating resentment. It's poor at creating connection. There's a funny thing I think about with control. I call it the paradox of control, and that is the more you try to control somebody, the less control you have. The less you try to control somebody, the more influence you're likely to have. Before I share this last personal story with you, if you're finding this video to be helpful to you, please scroll down below, click the link, and subscribe. And this will allow you to get more content from me, all these free videos. I want to illustrate now with a personal story from my childhood. And this illustrates the effect that control can have. I grew up on Navy bases. My dad was in the Navy, and we moved all the time. He was a naval officer. Well, in fourth grade, we were living in California, and this was my favorite year of elementary school. My favorite teacher, his name was Mr. Gordon. I loved Mr. Gordon, probably because Mr. Gordon loved me. He was a fun teacher, and I worshiped the ground he walked on. Well, Mr. Gordon was a social activist, and I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but I knew he was concerned about social change. One of his concerns was that the United States Navy was blowing up bombs on an island somewhere. I don't even remember where this was, but I knew from him that we had no right to be blowing up these bombs on this island. And so Mr. Gordon spent the whole day talking to us about this, and he wanted all of us kids to sign a petition to support this cause. And I was so excited because this is Mr. Gordon, and I wanted to do whatever Mr. Gordon wanted me to do. And I remember I excitedly ran home, and my parents were both there, and I remember sitting in the living room with my mom and dad, and I was telling them, especially my dad, who I also adored, and I was telling them, about these problems. Just a little bit of background on my dad. He's this big, strong, physically imposing guy. He's very respected, but he's also sort of gentle. We kids adored him. We worshiped the ground he walked on. Well, I was sort of clueless because I was in fourth grade. I didn't realize what I was actually saying to him. So I'm telling my dad about the bombing of this island and how awful the U.S. Navy was. And can you believe that? And here's my dad, an officer in the United States Navy. And to this day, I'll just never forget his response. This is, 40, 50 years ago. And he said, "Listen, Todd, I'm going to share with you my view of this issue. And it's very different than how your teacher feels about this issue." And then he said this, "And then I'm going to let you make your own decision about what you want to do." He told me how he viewed the event. It was 100% opposite of how Mr. Gordon viewed the event. And then he said, "I'm going to leave the decision up to you. You can sign the petition if you want, and I will not stop you." I'm telling you, by the time he told me how he felt and left the decision up to me, my decision was, of course, already made. There's no way I was going to sign that petition. Why did I change my mind? I was in fourth grade. I didn't know anything about anything. I really think it's because of the relationship that I had with my dad, the way he allowed me the freedom to make a lot of my own decisions. That had this natural effect of drawing me into him. He had enormous influence with me without ever trying to control me. Hey, if you've been struggling like the rest of us with some behaviors that are hurting your kids, I want you to start with these points that we've talked about today. But I have more for you. If you'll click the link below, it'll take you to a place where you can download a free ebook that I have for you. And in this ebook, it will give you lots of suggestions about how to have healthier influence with your kids.